Welcome to the Southampton Education School Research Seminar Series. I am Achla Gupta. I'm a lecturer and program coordinator of our seminar series. Our events are open to all. We aim to facilitate meaningful conversations and contribute to advancement in the field of education. Thank you so much for your interest in this event. I hope you enjoy it. Please feel free to visit our website for details about our upcoming events.
So I'm Penny Lawrence and I'm going to share with you some experience of spaces in a place called Stilt Town. It's the pedagogy of the educators working with the children and their experience on their housing estate. So I'll explain all of that as we go through. I'll start with where, the Stilt Town, the Alton West housing estate. Then I'll look at how, which was participatory research with 3 and 4-year-old children. We used multimodal methods, and you'll see how we worked with video and the children's photographs and narratives and drawings, involving their families as well as their educators, and share with you some of the key findings. So the focus on the network of routes and the entrance spaces near the blocks, plus the need to find a capacity for the problem of rubbish. There are implications for pedagogy of learning in the built environment, and this reveals children's spatial understanding and supports further learning with their parents and the community's involvement. We have some outcomes already, and this is because the community visited and decision makers from the local council, they visited an exhibition of the children's preferences, and we have recorded impact statements about the contributions this will make to imminent changes in the redevelopment of the shared spaces on the estate. So that's an overview of what we'll be looking at. Stilt Town is a nickname. It's the Alton West estate in Roehampton, southwest London. It is one of the UK's largest council estates. It's home to 13,000 people, and the area is earmarked. It's due for regeneration. Why Stilt Town? Well, here's an example. These are 5 slab blocks made of concrete of flats that the children live in, and they're built on top of pillars that you can see in the bottom right hand of the frame, and this is why it has the nickname of being on stilts, Stilt Town. The blocks are made up of maisonettes, so they're 2-storey units. So at the eye level of the child here, you can see what a unit looks like from the side, and looking upwards you can see how the units build on top of each other. And the children can look through the pillars underneath the blocks. You can see the cars the other side, and they can move through with their bodies, as you can see the bottom right. There is a dystopian image which is associated with this estate, and I have a couple of examples in front of me here. One is the Children's Laureate produced this book called Our Tower last year, and that's represented as concrete blocks which are grey and hard, unwelcoming and boring. And then Fahrenheit 451, the film adaptation by Francois Truffaut, chose this estate as the location for the book burning part of the story. So a place where you wouldn't necessarily be thinking it's a place for positive things happening. You can see the pillars there next to the bonfire. How did we make our participation? Well, I'm particularly interested in the voices of young children, and these can be verbal and non-verbal expressions of their preferences. And we worked with 11 families, children aged 3 and 4 years of age, and we worked with a class teacher who has experience of creative work with graphic representation, so 2-dimensional, mainly black and white. A family worker in the school, this is a nursery school, with expertise in non-verbal communication as well. And we worked participating, so the children you'll see on the left were documenting. They were taking the framing of the environment that they chose using an iPad, and they selected the images also from the video, and these became the foci in workshops with the families for them to take their ideas further. This is a dialogical approach to observation. So you can see the silhouettes at the bottom here. This is the children with their educators and with their families looking back on an experience, and in the experience they would be interacting with each other and with the environment and the materials, including the spaces. And we found that this approach to observation, meaning there's a dialogue about the children's experience, enhanced the awareness of multimodal meaning making, so that more than just the verbal, but also the children's gestures, and of how they were relating with the environment. So they were working, expressing their preferences in discussions with the families and the teachers with the drawings, and we'll see an example of that as we go forward. And non-verbally, so positioning, the expression of their understanding, positioning these very small figures, bottom left rather, around the pillars in their block play. And also mark making, which you can see in bottom right. I'm going to share some of the findings with you. The first set of findings was about the children choosing their way, and they were very interested in the networks of routes. They were interested in topography, so not seeing it as flat. They really did notice when there were slopes. We running together up the hill, up the hill, up the hill. And the edges of paths, very attentive to these surface details. They were choosing and selecting the way to go. And you'll notice that we did have to take precautions because of the presence of the cars on the estate. The cars have kind of come after it was designed. So now some of the way you navigate around it is impacted by the large number of cars. So holding hands became our way of moving around. However, the connections weren't just limited to the immediate pathways. The children were interested in the broader connections to the city, and knew, where do the buses go? So the 4:30 and 1:70 in particular. I thought you'd like these numbers. One going down particular names of roads to particular destinations such as South Kensington, Victoria. Showing their knowledge of the broader connections and representing those routes, quite complex, different bus routes here in this child's representation, and beyond the bus routes, explaining the train routes as well. So the train all the way to Clapham Junction and where that runs through. And so there was a confirmed interest in connections spatially and how they interact, the bus and the train networks. The parents brought some nuance to this, realising that there are some problems with the paths right near to the blocks. So bottom left, you can just see here, there's a path through the shade under the trees. There is not a path to the bus stop. And the parents noted that it's a bit disjointed. You might start walking the path and it will stop. Where do we go now? Okay, we've got to go on the grass and go onto that path. So some paths grow up, like desire lines they're called in design speak. But actually a logical layout of paths was being questioned by our participants, that it really wasn't there. And this is reflected also in an appraisal of the Alton estate as a conservation area, that it struggles, the estate, to be positively integrated, the streets or avenues, and the paths would really benefit from being more connected. And yet to move through, I'm on the last line now, to move through or visit would bring an immediate understanding of the estate and a sense of place. And I think that's what the children are representing. As they move through, they are understanding connections or lack of connection and an understanding of the place. Another finding was that the children could find play close to home, and of course play and learning are mutually beneficial, particularly entrance spaces. So this is one particular entrance space, a chimney. For them it was a chimney where Santa comes to our house. Not all houses are little one up, two up, two down terraces that you see in children's books. For these children, this is their chimney where they have their visit. And so it was an entrance space in their imaginative world, but they were understanding this tube, or funnel, because it's both, a funnel and a tube, as an entrance space. There were other interesting shapes here, vents, interesting scale for the children. And this led to some awareness of what goes through these entrances, because they're also exits. And the chimney maybe has some smoke or gas, as would the air vents. And so the children were representing that flow in the right-hand drawing there. And setting a level. This is very interesting emissions control. That the child has set a level for where she feels it would be safe to have emissions going through this, of whatever the particles might be. And questioning, she doesn't know if it's safe to breathe. We have to remember this is a 4-year-old. And it makes her worried, and she needs it to stop here. Very clear language about there's a limit to feel safe. That could be a question of capacity. A capacity for the particles and a capacity for well-being. There was a strong connection with the pillars or the stilts themselves and their function to hold up a house. And we're talking about slabs of concrete, which are really relevant internationally. You know, we know that UNICEF says it's going to be 70% of children will live in urban environments, and they will be highly densely populated with blocks of flats. So this is the reality of a house, has to be held up, and that you need lots of them, and they're exploring not only the presence but the negative space around these pillars. And the pillars are strong, they keep it up so it won't fall down, and they're thinking of this form that reaches up and how it all comes together in a form. And I'll come back to My Mummy Doesn't Go There, and we'll explore why. But very much interested in the beginnings of understanding force. That this vertical structure, you can push against it, it doesn't move, and it's holding up something that's on top of it. And what the dimensions are, you know, just with the measure that you have in the span of your arms, just understanding these things. Children are also aware of changes in levels, moving around the pillars and up and down the steps. Still documenting, you see the child with the iPad. And they're doing it playfully, so that is a way or manner of exploration of the space and understanding. And what are the changes in level 4? Well, these could be for play. For them, it could be a playful space for jumping. 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 They're also aware of other things that hang around entrance spaces where the rubbish is, and we'll be going to that shortly. Jumping to catch a fly. And some residents have left some chalk there by the pillars, and the children were really measuring height against the pillars drawing up to here, the reach of a child's height. Here is the third finding, which was about the capacity for rubbish, and actually that there wasn't enough capacity. The bins were always overflowing. There was more rubbish than could be held in a bin. Or, as is more neatly expressed, the bin is too small and the trash is on the floor. And for the children, if that happens, then it's too much trash. And they have a stated preference. They don't like it. They don't want this to happen. It stinks, it's disgusting, that's the rubbish. They also have a solution. If the bin is too small and the trash is on the floor, just get a bigger bin. It's not only wrapping paper, packaging. There's yucky stuff. The adult says, what kind of yucky stuff can you smell? Pee. Around the entrances, where you might want to play. Is it a good thing to be able to play near your entrance? And the children's preference was not to smell it, so they were taking action not to smell that. So there was an excess of pee. And they looked at capacities for pee. This isn't really pee, it's just yellow food colouring, I promise. And where would that go? Socially, what would the behaviour be that they would want? And that would be that it doesn't go by the entrance. Where does it go? And so they didn't have to explain all of that. They could make choices and reenact it. So that's what they wanted to happen, that it is disposed of properly. And this child said, I can do it, so why can't everybody else? And the issue extended to the lifts. This child doesn't go to certain areas and doesn't use the lift because of the smell in the lifts. And she lives near the lifts. She plays in the house rather than outside so much. And the mother checks. So that's the lifts, and you're saying it was smelly in there this morning. Yeah. Let's go to the implications of these findings, and they are across curricula. With a pedagogy of learning in the built environment, it can reveal the children's spatial understanding and supports further learning with their families and the community involved. And so I've just taken two parts of the early years foundation stage curriculum, and where there's a good correspondence here for mathematics, where we have a rich opportunity for children to develop spatial understanding, particularly for shape, space, measures, and really the fact that they could talk to adults and peers about what they notice. Understanding the world, I think, is a related area of the curriculum, and the children are making sense of the physical world and the community and the behaviours that are going on there. And the last sentence here, as well as the building the knowledge, the familiarity and the vocabulary, the word use that builds up, will help them across domains of knowledge. The outcomes so far have been that we've had one exhibition with the community visitors and the decision makers. I'll tell you about the decision makers in a moment. And what they were experiencing was the children's preferences. And after that, they recorded what the impact was on them, on their roles, and how that could contribute to imminent redevelopment of the shared spaces in the estate. So we had it open at different times, so people with different routines could come and participate. We have a participation zone on the right-hand side there, and interactive voice boxes for the children's voices, that the other children could hear what they had said. People were taking note, photographing, smelling. We had a smellophone on the right-hand side of what the smells might be. And here we have the city council, the borough councillors of this particular London borough, across party, so Labour and Conservative, came, took photographs of what the comments were. And the councillor sitting down here on the right-hand side, sitting down with the families bring in carrier bags of their recycling because they can't recycle on the estate, so they bring it to nursery. 13,000 people. No recycling. So there is a big picture to this, as well as the immediate inhabitants. And here's a parent's voice. It'd be great for those in charge, councillors, and Regeneration, that's the organisation that plans development, associations, that's housing associations, to hear that from the children's point of view, changes do need to be made. What to? The bins, the lifts, the walkways. So the things we found, capacity issues for the bins, connection issues for the walkways. Hopefully that can encourage them to hear and make a change. The decision makers' responses, they made pledges. The local council officer for Regeneration said there's a lack of access, we need adequate connections. A local councillor feeling connected, picking up on this message. Community engagement officer, navigation and play space. Promises. First councillor, the children are disgusted by the rubbish. I will redouble my efforts to get rubbish collection improved, and in fact this week she's taking it to the cabinet, or the group of councillors who make decisions for that borough in London. Other councillor, young people's views at the forefront. So that idea of voice going somewhere. Alton Community Action Group, I'd just like to stress that co-design principles include our youngest citizens. So there's learning, but there's also being a citizen. You have your mathematical learning, you have your knowledge and understanding of the world, and you have your sense of being a citizen with a voice to be heard. So just to conclude, next the exhibition goes on tour. It's going to the public library, and that starts next month. It could go into forming vision statements. So like this one I worked on for Winchester, just up the road here from Southampton, the vision statement going up to 2030 was partly based on a 2-year-old. This was a project I did with a 2-year-old in the built environment. Next, well, taking this work I've done inside the nursery buildings with shape, which is very much making sense of how the children make sense of shape. We are going to, hopefully in a collaboration, Jairus and I, go out into Southampton with building blocks and see how the children make sense of the shapes on location with some of the interesting shapes of Southampton. So we're feeling quite excited about that from our discussions, and we'll be in nurseries this week trying to set that up. There are references if you're interested, so I'll leave those on screen for a second so they can be part of the recording. But I've now reached the end of the presentation, and I hope that leaves us plenty of time for any questions that you may have. Thank you for your attention.
That's just